Hi, everyone. My name is Lindrell, and I got an idea to create a channel for people who are struggling with real life issues. They want to know how it relates to God's Word and how God's Word relates to everyday living. This is our first video. Hopefully, I'll get better as time goes on. Let's see, what can we start off with? Let's start off with me. A little introduction. I've been studying the Bible for let me see, I'm 52. And yes, I am 52. Said that really low, you notice. I've been studying the Bible since I was 17 years old, right? So over 40, well, about 30, let's say 35 years, give or take. But just because you've been studying that long doesn't mean that you have a clear conception of what the Bible is trying to say. I have learned through my experience over that time that the best way to understand the Bible is through prayer. When I was 17 and I was learning about God, I God had caught my attention. I mean, for a 17-year-old, I was going through pure trauma. I had been kicked out of my mom's house. I went to a college preparatory high school, and I rarely made it there because I had to think where I was going to sleep the next night. There were times when I was on the streets in New Orleans where I just slept on a bench and hoped that no one bothered me or kidnapped me or did something, to me. I remember times I was sitting on across from the St. Louis Cathedral, Jackson Square. I was sitting on a moonwalk, the steps that led down to the Mississippi River. Like it had about 10 steps. They're still there, but they sealed them off for good reason though. Because I remember sitting on that last step, just thinking, now what was my purpose in life? Why did I have such a hard life and I was only 17 years old? It started, I guess, when I was like 12. But those were 5 years of pure hell. And now I found myself alone with no one to lean on, no one I could rely on. Cutting class as usual, looking to the other side of the muddy Mississippi, watching the pattern of the waves, wondering, what could I have done so bad in life to deserve such a fate at a young age? And someone came out of nowhere and sat right next to me. And I can remember as if it was yesterday. Because at the moment he said what he said, it set me on a course to a better life. The guy looked at me and he said, this last step. No, he said, I wouldn't sit on that last step if I were you, because a wave can come by and sweep you away. Because that last step, after that step, that last visible step, there's a 10-foot drop. And the undercurrents can take you, and your body will never be found. And I thought about it for a while. I was like, okay, like that'll be worse than what's going on now. And I thought about what if I just slipped over that little edge? Because I felt I was 17. I had lived the life of a 50-year-old. Sometime in the future, I'll go over some of the things with you. And then I thought, on the other hand, right, as I say, good conscience told me, now, what if you slip on that step? You never realize the potential that your life will produce. You'll never realize how many people that your life and your experience will influence to make a decision, a positive decision, to decide that if you had not been there for them, they would have chosen otherwise. So, well, you got a point, you know? So I slowly eased back, dust my little self off, because the steps were already always muddy from the dry mud that had accumulated from the muddy Mississippi River. And I just start walking back to the French Quarter. Someone else came up to me. I think that was another day. But it helped me realize I didn't really have a clear meaning as to what God's purpose for my life was. But it helped me to realize that there is a purpose for our lives. I used to look at the young kids growing up in the ghettos of New Orleans. Well, we were like middle class, but my mom and I didn't really get along. So my mom was like, it's her way or the highway. She don't care if you're 13, 14, 15. You got to flip them out. You got to go. And then your things will soon follow after, right? So I was constantly getting kicked out or running away. Whichever one came first. So as a result, I had to stay with some of my friends that did stay in the ghetto and some of my friends that did stay in low income housing. The only reason we didn't because someone left my mom a house. And then my dad was a truck driver and they bought another house. And my mom worked 3 jobs, even though she had 6 kids. So they were constantly pulling in money left and right. But we were far from rich because a couple of years later, my mom and dad wound up getting a divorce, a separation first. And we went from living a little comfortable to collecting food stamps, standing in the lines of the grocery, being embarrassed at the way people looking down or holding their nose up at you because they thought that you were riding the system and that your mom, your parents were lazy and they just wanted a free ride. But anyway, so I seen how my friends lived. I seen the struggles. It helped me develop appreciation for the life that I had taken so ungraciously, the life I had taken for granted. And one friend I stayed with a little later, even when I got married, I seemed to always pick the wrong people. Because my first husband, I was working 2 jobs. He was working one and going to school. One day I came home. Well, I was working 2 full-time jobs and one part-time job when I was off from those full-time. We had a 1-year-old kid, my oldest daughter. So one day I came home and he's like, oh, we have to move. We have 5 days to move. I was like, what? No. It was like later I found out he had given his half of the money because I always paid half to carry my part of the weight. Because my mom was like one of those Amazon women. Like she would do work 10 jobs if she had to take care of her kids. And I guess I developed that mentality as a result of her being that way. So we would move from place to place. We had good paying jobs, but I can only suspect, I don't know if it's certainty, but my husband I think was on prescription drugs back then. And I didn't even have a clue. My mom isolated us well the times I wasn't running away or getting put out. So we didn't really have good social skills to begin with. So by 17, I was like Pinocchio, Pinocchio, I guess, getting in one situation after another. And because of me being naive, I was often at the short end of those situations. So what I didn't learn growing up as a child and exposed to the social norms of those days, I learned the hard way when I was out on my own at a young age. And trust me, life is a good teacher, but it's a merciless one. Every now and then, mercy comes across. So you're constantly trying to develop techniques of survival because you have to be ready because you've seen so many people that weren't and they no longer exist. Well, anyway, I was just telling you guys that at that point when I was sitting looking at the water race, race across the banks to the other side of the river, I was thinking, God, you must really hate me. I'm just 17. No, by then I had a miscarriage, and I was homeless. I was laying on a bench, and every now and then, someone would feel sorry for me. One of my school friends or one of my neighborhood friends, and they would let me stay there until my mom got wind of it, because her thing was like, well, either you're gonna live here and do what I say, or you're not gonna be happy where you are. Don't get me wrong, I love my mom. It took me a long time to recognize that she was a victim of her circumstances. Therefore, I became a victim in return. Not only me, but my entire family. My mom was married when she was 14. By the age of 22, she had 6 kids. And my dad was 20 years older, so he was 34 years old. And somehow it was allowed in the state of Louisiana. So they got married when she was 14. My mom didn't have a life to live. She didn't have any prom nights, homecomings. So she was more up into hard work versus education. But let me get back to the story. Well, my story is it's going on. I'm going to end this at 20 minutes. But at that time, when I was thinking, sitting on the dock, in New Orleans, looking at the water, a thought came across. And I reflected back to everything that had happened. I mean, I was young, so you would think not a lot happened, but you'll be amazed how much can happen in 5 years. So I was reflecting back, just thinking and fighting back the tears which flowed anyway as I reminisced each event of pain. I said, what could I have ever done to deserve that? And if there's a God, why would he ever let a child go through these things? Why would God even care to save me when he had a chance and opportunity to save me 5 years ago? And he didn't come to my rescue. I felt that God had turned his back on me, that he had abandoned me. I was born with some curse, destined to live my life of ill fate. But I wasn't staying by my parents' house at that time either. Well, my dad and mom had been separated, and I'll get into that. I was staying with some friends. Let's see, I stayed with my boyfriend parents. I'm trying to think with who I was staying with at that time because I went from place to place because I really didn't have any place to go, and I had to rely on other people's sympathy and empathy for me. I I'm sorry, I forgot that thought. It's like so much is racing. Well, one day I met this guy. And you know how the story goes: girl meet guy, and the rest of it's history. But I started going by his house and meeting his parents, and his brother just so happened to be there. And I thought his brother was the most aggravating person on the face of the earth because every time I would walk through that door, I wouldn't even get a good breath in to say good morning or give the greeting of the day when this guy would come and say, "Are you coming to church with us tonight? How about Saturday? How about Wednesday? We have Bible study on Tuesday. Mm, no, Bible study on Monday, prayer service on Tuesday with a sermonette, and Saturday we have the full shebang, the full service." Even though I was hurting and in despair, sometimes a person doesn't know how much they're in despair, where other people can look at you and easily detect. You become so accustomed to living a certain way, or being down all the time, or being depressed all the time. For a long time, I dealt with depression, and I didn't even know it. It wasn't until years later, decades later, that I was actually diagnosed with it. But anyway, so this guy just irritated the crap out of me for months. And so one day I just agreed to it. And I was having one of those bouts of depression. So my boyfriend then, he thought it might be a good idea if I went. So I did go. I and the preacher started speaking. I mean, the guy was so eloquent. He phrased his words so perfectly. And he told these heart touching stories that just touch you where you are because they relate. Some of the things that he talked about were the things that I was going through. Well, I was sitting four people within the pew because his brother wife, him, then me. And he was holding my hand, just watching my expression. It wasn't as if he was, listening to what the preacher was saying. He was just looking at me, I guess, to see if I was feeling better. But as the sermon went on, something struck a chord, and then another chord. Then all of a sudden, this cold, dead heart, I didn't feel anything for anyone, was coming alive. And all of a sudden, I don't know what he said, but something he said caught my attention. And from that point on, I was never distracted again. So I'm sitting there listening to this guy in amazement. Like, hey, did somebody tell him what's going on in my life? I said they must have went and talked to him before he spoke and let them know what to say. Well, anyway, he got to a point where I tried to hold back, and he kept saying, if you want a new life for the old one, if you want a warm heart for the cold one, step right up this way. And there's a song that goes that way, and get your new lives for old. But I don't know if that's exactly what he was saying, but that was the essence of what he was saying. And that essence, how would I say it? It overtook my entire body. It started as a little ting, and then that tingling sensation overtook me. And when he said that, is there anyone that needs prayer tonight to come up, or if there's anyone who want to dedicate their life to God that will never stop loving you? Because I had felt betrayed, I had felt used, I had felt despair, I had felt abandoned. I felt worse than a stepchild. I had no roots, I had no stability. I was staying by people that, under normal circumstances, I would never choose to stay with. Subjecting myself to stuff that I would never choose to subject myself to. The filth, the sins, the and the list goes on. But at that moment, I realized that this God that I hated, for the fact that I thought he hated me, and this God that I thought had allowed all these bad things to happen, I realized how much he loved me and how all along he was calling out to me, reaching for me, telling me, I am that friend. Remember that time you thought you wouldn't make it and somehow you made it through? It was because I was carrying you, my child. I have always been there. Now I would like to take you to a higher level. And the more that pastor talked, the more anxious I got. I got to a point where I felt that I could no longer sit down, that I had to get up. I had to let God know that I acknowledge him for for the times that he had been there for me. I had to let him know that I realized how wrong I was, that he never hated me, that he loved me with a love that no one else can ever compare with. So I went to get up, and my boyfriend jerked my wrist so hard and pulled me right back down. And I looked at him in amazement, and he looked at me, and how would I say, sneaky, subtle. He shook his head subtle, like, no, like it is not going to happen. And for a while, I heed to it, but that pastor seemed not to. Like he couldn't be quiet. And the longer he talked, the more anxious I got. That it got to a point that I can no longer sit still. It got to a point where I had to make a decision. And I already knew what that decision was. So I looked at my wrist that was tightly held by my boyfriend. And I took my fingers, the free hand, and I pried his fingers. I literally had to pry his fingers off my wrist. And then I stood up and I stumbled over the three people that were blocking my way to the exit to go up front. It seemed like it was taking forever. It was only 4 or 5 pews to go. But the journey seemed just that, like a journey that in my desperation to get there, because I no longer saw the pastor speaking. I seen Jesus. I seen Jesus standing there with his hands open, saying, I know you've suffered long, my child, but you don't have to suffer alone. He says, I'm here now, and it's going to be okay. No matter what come your way, it's going to be okay because I'm here now. And so it's like I ran up there. As soon as I got the strength enough, after about the second pew, I ran the other three and I put a death embrace around the pastor because I looked at him as Jesus himself, and I thought about all the things I had went through, all the things that had occurred in my life. They all flashed before my eyes. And then I thought about that I had finally found the person that would love me unconditional, the person that I wouldn't have to prove anything to, I wouldn't have to live up to any expectation. So the tears just kept flowing. And long after I got to the altar, they continued. And long after they escorted me back to the pew, they continued. Out the corner of my eye, I looked at my boyfriend, and he had expression of anger mixed with resentment. Because later I talked about it with him, and he confessed what he was feeling. He told me that, he wanted me to be more self assured because I was going through depression then and I didn't really know it. No, I just knew I was sad all the time. I would wake up sad. No matter how much I tried to fight the feeling, that sadness would overtake me. And then I would go to sleep, wishing that maybe tomorrow would be a better day, or maybe tomorrow would be the last day. Either way was fine with me because my life wasn't that great. You have to remember, I was thinking that way and I was only 17. I had only lived 17 years on the face of this earth, and that's what I felt. So I can understand his concern, but he said, I wanted you to listen so you can be more self assured, but I didn't want you to dedicate your life because that means we won't be having hanky panky. Well, he didn't say it like that, but and this children rated, the G rated. So I'm going to keep it like that. Well, to make a long story short, that day I had finally found the only person I felt would ever care for me, no matter who I am, no matter what I become, no matter what I did or have done. It all came to a head. In my life, I had took many roads going up to that point, going in many directions. And I tried to backtrack on some of those roads. But all of a sudden, all those roads, even though they all started out in different directions, came to this one center point called Christ. And it hit me in that moment that this was the direction that I had always wished for, that I was always looking for, and I didn't even know it my entire life. This was the point, the location, the destination that I needed to be, that all my answers was at this one place, and I didn't even know it. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up because it's been about 30 minutes. Let's say 20. I hope by my sharing this with you that it has helped someone draw nearer to God and to know that God isn't out to get us. God has never been out to get us. That's why, like you, having a wonderful, beautiful child. I mean, your DNA running through this child. And when the child grows older, you saying, oh, I should have never had that monster. But you fail and realize that 50% of that monster is your DNA. So what our children are at least half a reflection of what we are. And we're half a reflection of both of our parents, what both of our parents were. So when we look at the evil and we look at the good, they're both reflections of us intertwined together. So what we have, the challenge is, and I found this to be a challenge with me when I became a single parent. Um, the challenge is not only to help them repress their natural nature to do bad things, but the bigger challenge is for us as adults to inspire our kids to do positive things, to inspire our kids to walk after God. I made a lot of sacrifices for my kids. I mean, in the military, it was rough. I had 3 kids, I was single, and I could have probably hooked up with somebody, got married, but I never looked at things like that because I look at marriage as being a sacred, as much as possible, permanent. I always wanted my marriages. Well, I have been married twice, but I always wanted each time my marriage to be forever. And I guess a lot of us think like that. And ideally, if it was based on concept alone, most marriages would work. But we don't take in the human factor. And that's why the majority of marriages fail, which we'll talk about that later. But God says, He says, when your mother and your father forsake you, that I will take you up. So during your trials and tribulations, during the down times, the disappointments of your life, just remember that you have a friend that's waiting for you. He doesn't put you out in a wilderness, in a boondock someplace and say, okay, I'm waiting for you. I have all these blessings for you. Come and find me. In John 14, he said he went to prepare a place for us, right? And if he prepared a place for us, that he'll come again and bring us to where he is so can always be with him. So God hasn't left us. God is trying to get us to a position where we can rely on him and not on our own understanding, because our understanding, our mental processes are faulty. Our hearts are wicked. Our human nature is flawed. So we have to look for someone that have already overcame these things, and we have to get our strength from him. And there's only one person I know that has overcome this, um, the evolution of sin. That's what I call it. You know, the theory of evolution versus the evolution of sin. Well, I don't know about what you guys think, but I don't look like a monkey. I didn't come from a monkey or ape or whatever they want to call it. Because this is the thing I'm looking at the time. If we came from monkeys and they are apes and they evolved over time to man to become human, then why aren't they still evolving? I mean, you look around and you see apes, you see monkeys all the time. Why aren't they waking up one day and making that process from being the apes and monkeys that they are to human beings? Well, that's just food for thought. I'm going to go ahead and sign off. I hope you guys enjoy this video, and I'll try to do them. Well, I guess I'll start off like every 3 days or so. But I also have my journal. This is part, this is an introduction to the biblical studies that we'll be doing. We'll also be doing Bible studies, read along, amazing facts, and we'll also do my personal journal where you can see that I'm not above the law. I'm not walking on clouds. I'm not nowhere near off the ground. I'm just a sinner looking for redemption through God's word. Have a good night, everyone. See you soon.